When I first planted my garden, budget was really tight, so I bought the cheapest soil, and my father-in-law actually went to pick it up and wasn't really reading the thing, and it was topsoil. It wasn't even potting mix, it was just topsoil. And I thought, oh well, I'll make the best of it, and I beefed it up with a bag of really cheap plant compost. It wasn't even like castings, it was just plant compost. And then I added a bunch of coffee grounds to it and kind of crossed my fingers, and they established, and everything's growing and everything's sprouted, and so I thought I was all right. But after, a little bit, I noticed that the soil started to clamp and pull away from the pot. I mean, there's nothing in it, right? It's shit. It was garbage. So the poor plants. And they came down with powdery mildew, which I managed to nip in the bud with diluted milk. 1 part whole milk to 10 parts of water. Sprayed the living shit of all sides of the leaves, and powdery mildew was gone, only to end up with yellow leaves in my cucumbers. And of course, that's the classic sign of overwatering for your cukes, and because of all that spraying and stuff. And it's like, shit, like they're so pansy. My plants are just wusses, right? And I can't blame them. Just like if you don't feed yourself properly, your body's going to break down, and the same goes for plants. And if I expect them to be generous with me with a harvest, then I have to be generous too and do what I can to make things, healthy. But I can't get to a store. I'm kind of disabled, right? And my father-in-law's gone with the car, and I really can't spend money right now, even on a bag of decent compost. So I had to figure out how to tackle this problem with what I had available on hand. And did some research on things that you can add to soil to beef it up, and thought, why don't I do my own fertilizer? So that's what we're going to do today, a fertilizer. My first plan of action, though, is I'd like to make a fertilizer from my kitchen garden, which I'm then going to take some and make into a compost tea to really beef it up. And then by then, my plants should be ready for a new water. I need to let them dry out a little bit because of all that spraying. So hopefully by the time the tea is brewed, they'll be ready for a new water. And in the meantime, my first plan of action is to take some cornmeal. This is how desperate I was. I didn't even have cornmeal, couldn't get cornmeal, so I grabbed some popcorn that I had sitting in the cupboard, and I threw it in a coffee grinder because it didn't work in the food processor. Unless you have a doozy, don't even try. But in the food processor, in the coffee grinder, it wasn't bad. And I made my own cornmeal, which I'm going to put in the soil tonight. And cornmeal is a great antifungal, it turns out. Any kind of fungus related stuff, it'll suck it right out of the soil and away from the plant. So it's a really good additive to your soil. You just add it right in there. I'm also going to add some to the tea. The other thing I'm doing, did I say, head injury moment, did I say I'm making my own compost? I'm making my own compost. Oh, I said I was going to make a fertilizer, but I'm also going to make a compost. And here's the thing, I don't have worms, and I can't get worms. I can't even go outside and dig a worm, which you're not even supposed to do. You're supposed to use the red wigglers. I can't get a red wiggler, and I can't get an earthworm on the 23rd floor in a high-rise apartment. So I'm going to make a compost bin with nothing. With nothing. And we'll see how it works. And then if I can get worms in the meantime, they'll have a wicked habitat to come home to. So, yeah. Okay, so here is an old shitty garbage thingy, the push foot kind. And I've got a plastic bag in here. When my father-in-law comes home, I'm going to have him drill a bunch of holes on the lid of that. So when I do put worms, they get some oxygen. Okay, so this is where we're going to make our compost. This here is where we're going to make our compost tea. So I've got a bit of water in there. When I ground up my egg shells, because I used egg shells. Sorry about the mess there, I gotta clean that up. When I ground up the eggshells, there was some stuck to the food processor, so I swished in some water and poured it out in here, and they've been soaking for a few hours. Not necessary, but I figure, the more time it's soaking, the more it's going to break down. It's like no matter how much you take care of these and the best conditions you give them, you know, the cat grass, they're not made to last. There's no way, because these things don't last for shit. So I've collected a bunch of them, and that's what I'm going to use as my base for the compost. I'm not going to put this crap in the compost tea because it's nutritionally, you know, right? Sand. To the tea, we're going to add about a tablespoon of baking soda and a tablespoon of Epsom salt, and I have some more here that I'm going to throw into our little compost. That's cornmeal, again, very antifungal. We'll put a couple of tablespoons of that in there and throw the rest in here. These are eggshells that have been ground and dried. I'm going to put a few more in the compost tea. You know what, my plants need a boost, so we're going to go nuts. And we put the rest in. I had dry tea that's been in the cupboard way too long. You know what? I'm going to fish some out. This is green tea, and green tea are really good for plants, so I'm going to put some in my little compost. In the tea, we're going to add about a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Very, very good for the plants. They love this stuff. And we're going to put a tiny little bit inside our compost. Alright, you're gonna flip out, and I won't let you see it, but it's pea, okay? There's a cup of pea in here. Not even a cup, it's like a quarter cup of pea. Our pea is like awesome for plants. It has all this shit that I don't remember, but it's really, really good for your plant, especially if you want them to blossom and bear a lot of fruit. So we're gonna put a splash in the tea, and a splash in our compost. To the tea alone, you're gonna add molasses if you can get your hands on it. I can't. I'm gonna try maple syrup and hope for the best. The sugars feed the microbes, and you need the microbes. So every time I hear people do these videos on making your own compost, it doesn't smell. It doesn't smell. You're gonna love it. It's so earthy. What a load of shit. It's like 30 degrees today. This has been sitting in here for maybe 5 minutes, and it fucking stinks. So anyway, when it's stinky, that means there's too much acid. Now remember, we added some pea in here, and we got rotting bananas and shit, so we have to add carbon, brown stuff. So here's how gardening saves a marriage, because my husband eats all this stuff, and he eats it like a glutton. And look at that Tim Hortons shit. So and he leaves it all over the house, and it's something that I snap. This is like one of my issues with him. So normally I get mad, but right now I realize I needed cardboard, and I went scourging through his little spots, and I found like the mother lode. So what I'm going to do is add some soil on top of this, maybe an inch or two of soil, and then add some more of this carbon as a nice layer, and that should do the trick. So on top of all of that crap, I put a lot of soil and layers. It was soil, boxes cut up, soil, cardboard cut up, lots and lots of layers of that. Now I'm going to add a little bit of water, not too much, just enough to keep it, you know, a little bit moist in the beginning. And you're going to add water when needed, but again, always be careful not to add too much. That maybe was not enough actually, but there we go. And then cover with those boxes, and we're good to let it. Pretty swampy, eh? So that's our tea, and that's the mixture of all that good stuff. Now, if we let it sit here like this, they say in 24 hours you can use it. Some say 3 days, depends who you talk to. What's happening right now is the simple sugar, which was the maple because we didn't have molasses, was added to the water, and that's now feeding the microbes. And what we want to create is the perfect habitat for these microbes, because it's these microbes that build our soil and feed our soil. So the sugars are feeding the microbes, and what they're lacking is oxygen. If they had some oxygen, they would be multiplying like crazy. And I've seen some people's videos on compost teas where, you know, we couldn't use actual fresh compost because we haven't composted yet. So what we've done is use the raw materials for compost and hope for the best. And apparently this is better than nothing. So we'll start this until our compost is ready, and this should tide us over rather nicely. But again, because we're using the worst case scenario, I need to give it every chance I can for it to survive. So I'm going to use this old aquarium pump. I actually used to use it for a fountain, and I'm going to wrap it in some cheesecloths because I don't have, you're supposed to use a pump and do the whole fountain thing, but I don't have a pump to add. Sorry about that screaming. That is the annoying bitch that lives upstairs that insists on dragging her TV out on the balcony and listening to soccer really loud and yelling at the TV like her opinion means a fucking thing. So you use this pump, wrap it in some cheesecloth if you don't have a pump thingy to use. Isn't that nice? I love when my nails are dirty from soya. I'm not ashamed. And you throw it in here and you let it brew for 24 hours. And 24 hours is basically all you need to have an awesome compost tea. It's being pretty subtle, but it's going on under there. I can feel it vibrating, so it's getting some air. And that's all we really need. Just need some air pumping in there to keep that water circulating and aerated. See how it's all turning there? See a little bit of a bubble happening? 24 hours from now, this is going to be liquid gold. Okay, so here is the cornmeal. See, it's kind of, some of them are a bit big on the chunks, but that's okay. That'll be like slow release fungus control. So there's my cornmeal and my zucchini, and it's a good thing that I'm on this because I checked all my plants when I first started making the compost video. That was like maybe half an hour ago that I started this, and this plant was perfect. There was not a spot on it. By the time I was done my video, I don't know if you could see, it's very, very subtle. That little white dot. See that? See those little dots? That is your powdery mildew. So if I leave this, it's gonna, by tomorrow, this whole plant will be covered in it. So I have to do something. So I think, again, let's talk another remedy. I've been trying the whole milk, and that's not totally doing it because it keeps coming back. So I think I'm gonna have to kick it up a notch. So this time what I'm going to do, in a little spray bottle, I'm going to add the milk like I did before, but I'm also going to have to add a little bit of baking soda because that's a great antifungal. And also a little bit of vegetable oil. Canola would be ideal. Again, I don't have any. So I'm going to use a very light vegetable oil. And I'm going to mix that all together and give this plant a really good spritz. And the oil is, you know, it's supposed to be pretty good anyways, but they also said that about the milk. So let's see how this goes.